you're trying to grapple with where you want to take the business, but also this leadership role that you're playing. And there's no shortage of leadership coaches and leadership experts who will tell you how to lead and what to do, but you've got to back yourself around why you're there and what's got you to where you are, and important to trust your gut on what your style is and own that.
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner. Greetings and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Paul Spain, futurist and chief executive at Gorilla Technology. I love to see individuals and their organisations thrive. The New Zealand Business Podcast is all about this. Through authentic walks through the business and career journeys of top leaders, we help empower you to do better locally and on the global stage. Today, I'm joined by Justin Mercer, the Chief Executive of Jade Software Corporation, one of our longest-standing tech companies, deeply rooted in Otatahi, Christchurch, with reach across the country and around the globe. Justin was with Jade for over a decade before being appointed Chief Executive in 2023. Under his leadership, Jade has sharpened its focus on innovation, cost-effectiveness, and customer experience. He has overseen grassroots digital transformation inside the company, helped launch and expand key product lines such as Third Eye, their anti-money laundering and financial crime software, and has guided Jade through tight trading conditions to deliver a strong uplift in profit. Justin is driving a vision for Jade to be more audacious and outspoken in its role in New Zealand, re-establishing Jade as a company of national significance, expanding talent pipelines in tech, and exploring how software can contribute to growth in traditional sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and retail. The New Zealand Business Podcast is brought to you by Gorilla Technology, the tech services firm helping astute, mid-size, and smaller New Zealand organisations in solving business problems through leveraging information technology and artificial intelligence whilst driving down cybersecurity and data risks. All right, let's jump in. Justin Mercer, thank you very much for taking the time to join us in the Podcast New Zealand studio today.
Great to be here, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Now, always like to start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what you did in your childhood years.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'd say I don't have what you'd call a reality TV ready background there. It's probably a little bit normal in some ways, but maybe some of the themes will resonate with the audience. I mean, I very fortunate to grow up in Christchurch. Mum was studied biochemistry at uni and went on and worked in labs, and then like a lot of women of her era became a full-time mum. So I'm one of four boys. And so grew up quite a competitive household.
Yeah.
And Dad, he's very much got that self-made man type ethos. He became sort of man of the house in his household around 12.
Wow.
And so grew up more in a sort of estate-based house and put himself through medical school and always had a very strong drive from that perspective. And so I think, a lot of that sort of washed off early on. So, I think those things around, working hard, competing hard, were definitely instilled in us at a young age. And then probably around, early teens, my mum went up north. Some of my brothers and I stayed in Christchurch with my dad. And so all of a sudden we were, he's working late at the hospital and, trying to figure out how to cook and sort of everything else for yourself.
Yeah,
and so,
okay.
So I think, again, that sort of doubled down that whole independent side for me. And I remember, very early on, wanting to get my first car pretty much a day or so after you could get your license, and then that gave me independence. And then started working. I was working actually sort of weekends at McDonald's, saving up a bit of cash there. And then through high school, I guess that's really where I started thinking about how to get abroad. And actually my first job out of high school was doing door-to-door sales for Sky TV.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How was that? Were you successful?
Yeah, I think it sort of taught me a lot around you had to be right on message early on. You've only got a small window to make a good impression. Travelled around and drove around the South Island earning money there, and that sort of earned enough to buy a ticket to the States. And
Fantastic.
went over there and worked in a summer camp and had a bit of fun over there. Then went back, came back through Malaysia. Actually, just before that, 9/11 happened. And so woke up, and that was sort of a bit of a change that obviously happened in the world at that point. But, overall, that was my first taste of getting abroad and getting a better perspective or a broader perspective, I guess, on the world.
Yeah. So where did you spend time in the US?
I was working at a summer camp over in Pennsylvania there, and then with another mate, we jumped in the car and we drove from New York down to Corpus Christi in Texas. Delivered a Volvo, a 1980s Volvo to Corpus Christi, picked up another car and drove that to LA.
Oh, that sounds like a bit of fun.
Yeah, so that was definitely the first taste of getting abroad, and then came back to New Zealand, and I think, it had always been instilled into me, you've got to go to university, not for any particular reason apart from get that piece of paper. And I think what it did sort of teach me also was that, I wanted to be very focused and get through university as quickly as possible and get that ticket. So I ended up studying international business at Otago and Spanish as my minor.
Okay.
And then my last year I finished at a business school in Barcelona, and was working and studying over there.
So was that your initial plan, was to go to Spain, or?
It was a prerequisite with the degree, is you had to spend your last year abroad at a university. And I managed to condense my papers and get them all done over there. So I didn't have a reason to come back, so to speak, at the end of it. Yeah, and so that sort of found me in Barcelona in sort of mid to late 2004. And I just remember, young kid from Christchurch in the big city lights of Barcelona. I had no sort of desire to go home anytime soon. And I was working in a bar there, and I was trying to break into the corporate world in Spain, which was quite tough actually at the time, because obviously all your interviews are in Spanish.
Yeah, and how was your Spanish at that point?
Well, it was passable in the clubs and the bars, but I don't know if I could get deep on the business side of things. So I guess long story short, I was really down to the wire. I had about $500 left in the bank account, and I used to go to the business school where I finished my degree, to use their free Wi-Fi. And one day I ran into this bloke who said, "Oh, what are you doing here? All the other international students have gone home 6 months ago." And anyway, he said, "Look, my cousin works for a company that looks for dual English and Spanish speakers, and do you want to see if I can get you an interview?" So it was literally, I think, about 2 weeks before Christmas, and sort of had to roll the dice. Do I spend the rest of my money on a suit for this interview, or do I, try and travel a bit before I get my ticket back? And so brought the suit and went to the interview and got the job. And I remember being in the interview, and they said, "Right, you've ticked all the boxes." The interview was mainly in Spanish and a little bit of English at the end.
Okay.
And they said, "Right, your first assignment's in Rwanda." And I knew Rwanda was in Africa, but I didn't know much about it. But of course, I thought, you've got to play it cool here. So, left the interview, went home, told my flatmates I was off to Rwanda, and then sort of Googled it and suddenly realised where I was going and what I was up to. So that started the beginning of 3 years with this company, travelling around with them, doing interviews and gathering content for promotional articles they'd do in magazines like Fortune magazine and Business Week. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
How much of a shock to the system was it to land in Rwanda? Because that I'm picking would have been a somewhat different lifestyle than what you were accustomed to. And I guess interested to hear a little bit more around where you travelled to and what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, that 3 years in a nutshell was about a year in Africa, about a year and a bit in the Caribbean, and the remainder of the time between Eastern Europe and Asia. I think, every country's got its own, quirks and interesting stories. I think, within Africa, I was going to a range of places like Ethiopia, Nigeria, Uganda. But I think the biggest thing, regardless of whether it was Africa or the Caribbean or otherwise, is you really get perspective on a global, this global world we're part of, and actually how fortunate we are in New Zealand, and how good we've got it, and fundamentally, everyone out there's just trying to get ahead of life, regardless of whether you grow up in Rwanda or you grow up in New York.
Yeah.
And, everyone just wants to have a better life for themselves and for their kids. And I think it's really grounding, not only because you get perspective on different cultures and different ways of doing things, but that to remember that when sometimes you think your chips are down, actually there's a lot of people doing it out there tough, and they are taking a glass half full to their situation. So, I think really stuck with me.
Yeah, it's certainly something I've noticed with some of the places that you travel, which are very different to New Zealand, and you see people that are so positive and just seem to be in a great space, but you recognise that their lot in life is certainly starting out is very, very, very different to ours, but you can still bring positivity to those situations, right?
Yeah, and it's not trying to downplay, how tough it is. I mean, obviously, I can't pretend that I know what it's like growing up in an environment like that, but I think it is a reminder sometimes where we get a bit down and out on the troubles at home, that there's a whole portion of the population out there that are competing with us on a business level. They're all trying to create businesses and create companies and whether it's grow in their domestic market or export abroad. And I think it's probably important to remember that when we are trying to compete on a global scale as well. Mm. And that's often what I really enjoy about traveling with Jade and getting out of Christchurch. Love being in Christchurch. Love the resurgence there, but it's always good to get perspective of actually where we sit in the world, and sometimes what we think people are talking about us, they actually don't even know we exist down here in New Zealand. So I think it's always good to get that perspective.
Yeah. Looking at your time in the US before you studied, do you think that sort of shaped you? Do you think you sort of took away some learnings, because there's a whole sort of different approach, I guess, in the US, and I often hear about it in the startup world, and like, I went to the US and learned this and this and this and this, but you went there much younger. Do you think anything really sort of stuck with you from the US that helped you as you went to different parts of the world?
Well, I think probably the US I visited is probably slightly different to the US today. But what definitely struck me from that time in the US, which was largely pre 9/11, was this sense of identity, of wanting to be American, wanting to I guess achieve and grow, in the sense that they really had limitless ambition and possibilities. And I guess the other thing that really stuck with me from that is, you've got to put yourself out there and be bold and be audacious to stand out sometimes in the crowd. And a bit about that is just getting that self-confidence to back yourself, or back your company or back your team.
Yeah. It's important, isn't it? So what led to that era, and a Spanish company, was it, or were they a more international company that you were with?
Yeah, so they were based in Spain and obviously had different subsidiaries they work with, and those different entities. So, I mean, that was a great experience. Got to see a lot of things, got to meet a lot of people. I distinctly remember I was having a chat with my mum actually at the time in Ethiopia, and she said, "Why don't you get a real job?" And I think what she was trying to say is, you've been traveling out of a suitcase for 3 years. How come why don't you come home? So actually around 2007, I came back to New Zealand, and I wasn't actually planning on staying. I had a ticket booked to go over to Melbourne, and a friend sent me a job advert for the trade agency, New Zealand Trade Agency in Wellington. So ended up working there for a year and a half. And look, I learned I don't want to stay in government. That's probably my key takeaway. But it was really interesting, actually, understanding the inner workings of our government. That role in particular was kind of an advisory communications role, that liaison between the department CEO and the ministers, so Minister of Trade, Minister of Economic Development. And so, of course, we were writing a lot of the briefing papers that went up to the ministers. So you got, a unique perspective on almost the influence that those agencies can have in the messaging. But also it was a great opportunity to get perspective of New Zealand business and New Zealand exporters. And that's what really attracted me to the role in the first place.
Yeah.
And, probably with, great sort of naivety, I thought, I'd make a big impact on all these New Zealand businesses. And I think, another key takeaway from that is actually you've got to go really deep in an industry, in a sector to understand it and be able to deliver that value back. But it was a great opportunity to get exposure to all these amazing New Zealand companies that are taking on the world. And also, I guess, reaffirmed my belief that I wanted to be on that side of the fence, so to speak.
Yeah. So what were the biggest, takeaways? Because you must have seen so many things from a business perspective as well as a government perspective. Mm-hmm. What did you get to see and become aware of in terms of how our businesses do on the world stage and our strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I think the first thing is you couldn't write a script to pick what businesses are going to come through. And I'm sure you've heard that before, but it is hard to pick winners. And I remember some of the companies that were coming through and growing rapidly are never sectors or solutions or propositions that you would have thought. So that was number one. So I can see it's very hard from a government perspective to put in place certain policies that based on the assumption that this sector is going to be our sector that we're going to win in.
So much of it comes down to the people, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And you put the right people into an impossible situation, they will achieve the impossible. So often it's tied up in the people, isn't it? And we look at some of the incredible successes we've had as a country, and quite often they're not in areas that anyone would have predicted a decade or two in advance. So it's kind of the combination, and sometimes people achieve what seems impossible in a particular area.
I think probably the other thing I'd call out is that it was clear that there were certain regions where the sort of services government could offer were a lot more valuable at that time, and that probably evolves as well. But going into markets like China, where you've got that sort of air cover from a government agency, I think seemed to be very beneficial for a number of the exporters. Whereas going into Australia or something like that, a lot easier to do business there. So I think also there's certain places in the world where a bit of government support is helpful, even if it's more in just opening those diplomatic doors.
Yes, because I imagine it quite often is it's back to the people who you can introduce to who and in the right places, rather than that the government's got some sort of magic key to
black
open
book.
Yeah. But it can be one introduction can make all the difference. Or
Yeah, I mean, the power of the network, and saw that a little bit at the Jade Velocity event is incredible. So that was my time in government. Highlight was we got to dust off the Spanish again and organise a delegation with the Spanish King. He came over with some Spanish businesses at the time, and then finished up with them. Took a sabbatical, I guess you'd call it. Went off to South America for about a year. And then came back and landed in Sydney. And that's really where my journey with Jade begins.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, South America, I've never been there, but any observations or learnings? I know, we've got, I guess an increasing amount of business that New Zealand does with South America. I don't know if Jade does any business with South America, but any sort of observations you can share?
Well, yeah, I think though it's those networks again are key. A Jade partner, which has the Madcap Dairy software, he does a lot of business in South America throughout Argentina and Brazil, and I know just it's all about the networks getting in, sometimes getting those business brokers to help you get the right relationships, and even whether it's around the more volatile economies where you need to start hedging how you receive payments, etc. But ultimately, I think it's about being really clear on your value proposition, building those networks. I know, the team at Contech who have the Madcap product, leveraged the All Blacks playing there with the Argentinians the other day. So, no, I think outside of that, to be honest, a lot of my time in South America was more surfing and on the beach. So didn't get too close to the business world over there.
Yeah. So why Australia? Why did you end up in Sydney?
Yeah, I think just at the time I wasn't quite ready to come back to New Zealand, and it felt like the right balance between sort of a big enough city at the time and close enough to home. And so landed in Sydney, and I was doing a bit of contract work there still with the trade agency, and then this opportunity came up with Jade. So
this was around 2012 sort of time frame?
Yeah, that's right. So I was interviewed for that role, and it was really around how to grow their services business in Australia. I remember joining. I met Craig Richardson, who was the CEO of the time of Jade, and met with him, and sort of, he spoke about what he wanted to do with the company, and then I joined the office, and I think it was probably maybe 6 months later, that's when Wynyard separated from Jade. So quickly I went from being a kind of a part of a team to an office of one as they, separated out the business and listed that on the stock exchange.
Yeah, right. So for those that aren't familiar, maybe tell us a little bit about what Jade has traditionally done, and then what Wynyard Group was about.
Yeah, okay.
Just to sort of fill in the picture there.
Bear with me here for about 5 minutes,
okay.
I give you the kind of the short version of Jade's history. So 47 years old, tech company, based out of Christchurch. It was actually started in 1978 by Gil Simpson and Peter Hoskins, now Sir Gil Simpson. And the original language they developed is a programming language called Link, and it ran on mainframes, and it ran on top of what was called Unisys. Before that, it was actually Burroughs, which merged with another company. But long story short, it was this programming language which ran on top of Unisys systems and used mainframe compute. And that was a roaring success. They started building what they called the Link Development Centre in Christchurch, 1982, 87. They opened sort of stage 2 of that. The former Prime Minister, David Longy, opened that facility.
Yes.
And then not long after that, I think that same year, they launched Cardinal Networks. So that was really a front runner to cloud computing. And what they do is they'd buy up compute capacity on mainframes and then run other systems on it. So really pioneering stuff at the time, both in terms of the vision for helping make computers easier to program and how you'd use distributed compute. And so that the two main parts of the business. And then somewhere along the way there, I think it was around 96, they launched the Jade language, which was the next evolution. And things went a little bit south in terms of the relationship with Unisys. Unisys started to come in direct into Australia, and the decision at the time was, well, we'll go alone, and we'll actually migrate a bunch of these Link systems onto Jade. And so that really became the end of the Jade Unisys relationship.
Right.
But at that point, there was a number of Jade systems running all around the world at that point, underpinning big insurance businesses, banks, and then a number of big systems were built from 96 onwards that underpin and continue to underpin critical parts of infrastructure around New Zealand and further abroad. So, if you think about electricity registry in New Zealand, that's entirely run by a Jade system. There's railway systems over in Europe running on Jade. There's big inventory management systems running on Jade. So there's these amazing breadth of systems that were built on Jade. And so that was one part of the business. And the other part was very much around product development and product innovation. So these are software products built on top of the Jade platform,
yes,
as we call it today. And so they were products that were built for education, for healthcare, for ports and logistics. And then around 2003, effectively, the business had been spread too thin on both those fronts and needed capital. And that's at that point where stepped in and became a shareholder.
Okay.
Along with a US investor.
So Skipton, UK based, right?
Yeah. So Skipton Group, UK based, a member owned bank and real estate group. And I've got to say they've just been absolutely fabulous for Jade in terms of stability, but also, investment in Jade. But I can come back to that. And so if you continue down along that timeline, then you get to around 2013 when Craig came in and took over and bundled up a number of the cyber and financial crime type products, and listed that as Wynyard on the stock exchange in 2013. And then that went on to build for a couple of years. But again, the thing that undid them there was really around execution, I guess, in an end, and ran out of cash, and that imploded, unfortunately, in 2016. And so then from there's separating of the logistics business. So that happened, the ports logistics business. And that's where Skipton really became a 100% shareholder towards the end of 2019. And then the last few remaining shares around 2022.
Yeah. Oh, it's quite fascinating and quite a history. I had a chance to chat with Sir Gill in Christchurch recently, and boy, there's a lot of stories in there behind the scenes, and really, I think when you look across Jade's story, it seems to be a lot of innovation from some incredible early days ideas, and that kind of continues on today. So really, really inspiring what can be achieved.
Yeah, I think the final part of that story is that underpinning both these big parts of the business, the enterprise side and the product side is the Jade platform, and that remains true today. And we continue to invest heavily in the platform. I think the key probably change from Gill's days is around, or Sir Gill, is that we start to think more holistically about the platform and the different technology that we use to make up that platform.
Yeah.
And at its heart, it's around how do we enable entrepreneurs to build really clever software on top of it. And our community has shown that they can do that. They can do it really fast, effectively, and it's super robust once it's built on that. And that's how you've got these, from the outside, quite small companies underpinning, whether it's giant dairy supply chains, or whether it's throughout food manufacturing, or whether it's, running our largest tourist attractions in New Zealand. So it's a real honour to lead the business and to continue that investment and continue to grow the community.
Yeah, that's great. So from coming on in that sort of initial role, and then finding as things sort of split with Wynyard Group that it was just you in Sydney there, because what would the team have been before that split? There was
so you'd have a mixture of your sales, your support, some engineers, pre-sales engineers there. Definitely smaller compared to the head office in Christchurch, but it was definitely a tough period. And I think if go back to the story I was sharing right at the start, when you've got this innate kind of want to succeed and desire to somehow find a way through, that very much I tapped into that when you're in a box by yourself in Sydney trying to start a business. I think, like anything, you've got to build a good team around you. At that point, it was about leaning back into New Zealand and getting as many people as I could to help me. And I quickly learned that trying to sell technology is not the way to go. People fundamentally don't want to buy technology; they want to buy a solution.
That's it,
or a product that gives them an outcome that they're looking for. And so there were a number of sort of iterations. I remember we were about 12 months in, and I thought, God, I'm probably going to get X this year. We hadn't made much progress in terms of the business development, and we finally brought on a couple of customers, good, well-known brands in Australia at the end of that year. And fundamentally, that was about, making that pivot mid-year to go, let's stop trying to pitch this new integration mobile platform, which was what it was at the time, and let's start to, it was in that era of the App Store had really exploded. A lot of businesses are trying to grapple with what their digital experience looks like, whether they're building mobile apps or portals, etc. And so it was very much around how do we bring in the right design capabilities and technology capabilities to help them bring to life what is it that these business folk have in their head, and then build from there. So that really went on, and then from there I started to lead the customer team in Australia and expand that out, and we grew the team to around 20 in Australia over that period, and that involved a lot of work in the financial services space. But I was really proud of that period, not only because I think it's one thing building a business when you're when you're the founder and you can call all the shots, and it's another thing where you've got to try and influence, people along the way.
Yeah. And so when you started in Australia, what was there in terms of existing clients? Was there anything to start with?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple of what you'd call your traditional clients that were mainly running systems that had already been built prior, and there hadn't been a big evolution of those systems. And the mandate that I was given was very much go and find new. And so that's what it was really about, building a brand new book of business.
And how did you do that? Because I guess Jade wasn't a household name in Australia, right? It's not you're rolling into town and you're a big Silicon Valley company that everyone's heard of. What was your take and your approach to go out and effectively win this business probably from scratch in most cases?
Yeah, so a key part of that, I remember we were pitching for the largest life insurers business at the time. It's called Tao, and we knew to stand out we had to bring it to life somehow in terms of our capability and offering. So that was really about convincing the leaders at Jade at the time that this was an opportunity worth going after and putting in that effort to actually do our own customer research. So ahead of during the tender process, we went out and interviewed customers, brought the proposition to life, and actually showcased that research and our vision for where we could go with it as part of the tender process. That got us in the door, so to speak, and we got this very small piece of work, and then naturally you over-service on the first piece, over-deliver. That got us some more work, and then we knew to really bring to life the capabilities of Jade, we had to fly the management from the insurer over to New Zealand. So we hosted their, I think it was Chief Innovation Officer at the time, GM, and their CIO, and brought them to Christchurch and gave them a broader view of the capability that Jade had. And then once we had that, and we started to go deeper into that financial services vertical.
Fantastic. That's great. And then moving on from your role as Director of Customer Solutions in Australia, what happened from there? Yeah,
so at that point, we had started to reinvest in our financial crime product, an AML solution called Jade Third Eye, which really helps customers detect and prevent financial crime. And there was an opportunity to get more involved leading that side of the business from a growth perspective. And that was enjoyable to learn more about a SaaS sales cycle and I guess just that product development side. So led that part of the business, growing that across Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, and started to get more exposure to what we were doing outside of Australia and learning a new industry. And then from there, it got to that point by the stage I failed to mention I actually met my wife when I was in South America, and she was going north, I was going south, and she was a Sydney girl, and might have been part of the reason why I landed there as well, Paul.
Yeah.
And anyway, we reconnected, and by this stage, fast forward, we've got 3 little kids, and we're living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Sydney, and thought, right, it's time to give New Zealand a crack. And Jade were great. They enabled me to come back to New Zealand with that role. We enjoyed a bit of quarantine and all the goodness that goes with that.
Yes, yeah.
Character building moments. And then we landed in Christchurch, and shortly after that took on the responsibilities for customer and customer success more broadly across the business, just helping grow across all our product lines, including the Jade platform. So again, got broader awareness of the different parts of Jade. And then the opportunity came up in mid-2023 to lead the business.
Exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what did that process look like? Because these things can vary a bit, right, in terms of how it all comes together.
Yeah.
How did that play out for you?
Yeah, I think if I'm entirely honest, I never had designs on thinking, oh, right, I'll be CEO of Jade. It was, I think if I come back to some of those things at the start, working hard, backing yourself, taking a few risks here and there. And when the opportunity came up, immediately I said, I'm happy to step in as interim CEO. So this was around the start of that year. And so was interim CEO, went through the process with all the external candidates and, had the opportunity to present first time what my vision was for the company and where I saw it going, and not only to the chair of our board, but also to the shareholders over in the UK. So I think it's a combination of sometimes getting yourself in the right position to take that shot, and then was appointed into the role sort of late April 2023.
Yeah, great. So, tell us about this journey over the last, the last couple of years. Now you're responsible, sort of, start to finish, to the board, your shareholders, and your team and your customers. That's a pretty big responsibility to carry. How have you enjoyed that? What have been the I guess the highlights and the
highs and lows
and the lows of this?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it's a great honour to lead Jade in such a great company with such a rich pedigree of history in tech in New Zealand. And I think the key part for me, I definitely, going into the role, you probably don't feel the gravitas until you're in the role, and then suddenly you think, right, I've got this legacy here that I want to build on and maintain and grow. But yeah, for me, it was all about a couple of things. Getting really close to our customers. That was number one for me. It's a part of the business I'd always come from, but I think, naturally, you hear it repeated again and again. There's a reason for it. You've really got to love your customers, understand what their pain points are to help inform, some of your thinking about where to take the business. I think the other thing is, transformation is hard, and we often talk about startups and scaling companies, but I think, transforming an enterprise is right up there. Obviously, I can't say I've done both, but I think just from the outside looking in, I think there's a number of parallels around whether it's time it takes you think it's going to take to do something, whether there's times where you've got to be really bold and make bigger decisions to get the cultural change you need, or sometimes saying no to things to make sure that you've got enough focus on where you want to take the business. So I guess for me, the other thing I'd probably, really stands out is, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will resonate. As soon as you're in that CEO role, everyone's got an opinion. And some of that you expect,
Yes.
do we have a different type of drink in the fridge? And some of them is much broader around, what some perceptions are around what you should or shouldn't do as a leader. And so I think that's probably one of my biggest learnings and takeaways in that first sort of 6 to 9 months. You're trying to grapple with where you want to take the business, but also this leadership role that you're playing. And it's actually, I think if there was one kind of big lesson for me, it's to be really authentic. And there's no shortage of leadership coaches and leadership experts who will tell you how to lead and what to do. But at the end of the day, I think you've got to back yourself around why you're there and what's got you to where you are. And then, that doesn't mean that you close yourself off to learning. I think 100% you've got to have this mindset of curiosity, continuous development and learning. But I think it's also important to trust your gut on what your style is and own that.
Yes.
Because people quickly, they see through that.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of challenges that you came into, be it sort of, culture or, financial types of things, what did you have to kind of face up to and get your head around?
Yeah, I think the first thing for me was really important to bring some stronger commercial discipline to the business. And there were a couple of reasons for that. One is fundamentally, having a strong commercially performing business gives you more options and more choice. People want to be part of a business that's growing and is successful. But also it's about demonstrating that credibility with the shareholder to give options further down the line, and whether that's investing in new product development and organic growth. So that was number one, was really get good commercial discipline into the business. The second one was obviously surrounding yourself with great people and really taking time to recruit the team. And
how hard is that when you're in a business that's been around for a substantial period of time, and sometimes in those cases you might have folks that have been around for a long time, and they bring a lot of knowledge, but as times change, you might want to shape culture in a different way, and you talked about the commercial aspects, sort of needing to sometimes ramp those sort of things up, and folks are sort of there that are maybe being quite comfortable, and you actually need to turn the heat up or turn the dial up in different areas. How challenging is that?
Yeah, well, I think that definitely a lot of learnings through that. I mean, fundamentally, I think there's two ways you can approach any transformation. You can start with, okay, this is what the strategy is, and then I recruit for that, or you make a decision that the environment that you've got there on day one doesn't facilitate the right discussion. And so for me, it was the latter. So I first and foremost looked at changing the structure, taking out some roles and recruiting in roles while we drove the commercial discipline we needed. And then once I felt we had the right team, then refresh the strategy and in strong collaboration with the Jade board. And we also had a refresh of the Jade board. And so, I mean, ultimately that is about just, facing into tougher conversations, having those conversations with humility, being fair and transparent around what you're trying to achieve. But also ultimately, it's taking this balanced view of risk and how much change you want to do at certain points, because, you need to also maintain a level of continuity from knowledge and experience. So, I think it's always a balancing act. There's no right or wrong way to do that. And for me, I've been very fortunate that, some of the team wanted to be part of the new mission and stay on, and they had that longevity, and some we were able to attract actually from up here in Auckland and come down and be part of the new team.
Yeah, I mean, these sort of challenges are pretty hard to navigate with sort of empathy and in a way that ultimately you're not going to be able to please everybody when you have to make bigger changes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I think I'm sure a lot of your listeners will resonate with in terms of navigating change in the business world at the moment. We've gone through that wave of COVID out the other side, what that means from ways of working and certain lifestyles that have developed. And I think it's just being really clear on what you want to achieve and why. It's the why behind it at the end of the day. And a lot of the transformation really comes down to simple communication and just repeating that message around, why this change is being made. And ultimately, I think if people can understand the why, they'll get on board with that. Some won't. But also, I think you've got to be brave enough to stand up and say, well, we are transforming and going in this direction, and maybe that's not for everyone, but that's okay as well.
Yeah. And how does the business look now? A couple of years on and down the track.
Yeah, I'm really happy with where we are today. I think like any CEO, you want to have done more and have gone faster. But I think we're really well positioned in terms of our strategy and executing. We're reinvesting in the Jade platform. And so some of those new capabilities we showcased at the Jade Velocity Summit down in Christchurch. So how we incorporate AI and AI agents into the platform, and they'll be released over the coming months, and a lot, how we drive further productivity for the teams that are building products and solutions on top of Jade, more around what we're doing to get data in and out of these systems. I mean, at the end of the day, that, as people say, you don't have any AI without data, and, that's your fuel, and the beauty around a lot of the Jade customer base is that rich data they've got. So more capability in that space. And fundamentally, if I come up, the stack and look at the actual business, we've got a great financial crime product in Jade Third Eye that's been growing, around that 25% year-on-year mark for around 5 years now.
What sort of customers do you have using Third Eye?
Yeah, so we've got a mixture of banks using it. We've got wealth managers using it. We've got your foreign exchange houses using it, casinos using it, across New Zealand, Australia, and the UK. And in particular, what we've found is a really good product market fit for that product is around non-bank lending, banks, and wealth management. And so, again, that's one of the things that quite often people don't know from the outside is that Jade processes and detects a lot of pattern recognition across transactions throughout New Zealand and Australia. So quite proud of the role we play in detecting and preventing financial crime in New Zealand. And as we've grown more market share in that space, I can see that the next leap there and how we do more with the data in terms of harnessing that to provide an even enhanced service to customers. So that's a big part of it in terms of growing the financial crime product. The other big part is how we scale the other SaaS products from our partners on top of Jade. And again, a lot of people don't know that Jade runs under the hood, and whether that's helping them from a brand and marketing perspective, whether it's actually helping them from a managed service perspective so they can free up to look on, develop more features for their customers. But you'll definitely see more in the market around how we are helping these great products grow. And some of, if I was just going to list off a few of those, you've got the likes of VCare, which does all the management of beds for aged care providers. So all throughout New Zealand, a lot of the aged care facilities are all running on VCare, which is powered by Jade. If you've gone to, Hobbiton or some of the great walks, it's all running on a Jade system. The Sydney Harbour Bridge climb, that's all running on the Custom Link software. So Sam and the team are doing a great job scaling that. And then you've got the likes of Able, who have a tool for food manufacturing to really trace food and supplies all throughout their supply line, do all the invoicing and billing, etc. And so you've got these amazing products that are underpinning big parts of the economy. So we're doing a lot to help them scale and grow. And a lot of them are already in multiple markets around the world. Yep. And so it's how do we start to really flex that community to take the next step forward. And the final part of that puzzle is around how we make it easier to learn Jade and help the next wave of entrepreneurs come in. So we've already got a number of NZQA accredited providers teaching Jade. It's how we take that course further. And we're very much of the mindset that, people will use Jade in conjunction with other technologies. And so it's about how we make that as seamless as possible.
Yeah, I guess today it's really key, right, to have that interoperability with whatever technologies that an organisation wants to use.
Yeah.
So why do you think that that Jade's still around and you're able to sort of keep getting the traction you keep winning more deals? It was interesting chatting to just some of your partners at the event in Christchurch and just hearing some of their stories, but one of them was talking about they were handling all the payments for Nestle, I think, to the farms that are providing milk to Nestle. Contec, Contec. Yep. They were in there as a provider, for maybe one market, and Nestle was in, 15, 20 markets, and they wanted to standardise in on one product. And the product that was built on Jade, that won on the day and took over globally. And then they were saying, now we're being brought in to handle that for paying coffee growers, in all of the countries that and just hearing these sort of stories of New Zealand successes on the global stage, and you look to sort of Silicon Valley and the Microsofts and so on of this world, who and varying open source platforms, and to know, hey, we've got Kiwi technology here that's has been winning for a long time and is continuing to win, and to score these sort of big deals, it's pretty exciting. Why do you think that's happening? What is it that's sort of special there?
Well, I think if you talk to any of the Jade partners, the one thing that comes through is that they've built products on Jade which really tackle the complex. And and they leverage a lot of the great capabilities that are in the product, which is, how you can model complex situations and then have that coupled with the really powerful database that is within the product to do things which are maybe a little bit harder to do in other technologies, or you're suddenly starting to stitch together a few different pieces of technology. And so, every company, whether it's Contact, as you mentioned, who have the Madcap product, whether it's someone like Simplify, who do all the complex rules for workforce management for supermarkets and all the pay roles for that. A lot of them have taken what is quite a complex problem to solve and done it in a really elegant and simple way. And so then, through that, they have just been laser focused on the niche that they want to go into and gone really deep in that. And so, and then through that, you start to integrate other data sources or connect into different systems, and that really cements their competitive advantage. So, it's great to, I guess, showcase more of these Jade partners, and also I think tell those success stories, because that's going to be a key part for the next generation coming in. Like you said, often we look offshore around, well, what's happened over there? But there are these amazing businesses that are part of the Jade community that are really competing on this world stage and winning. And I think the more we can celebrate those, the more, potentially that next entrepreneur will build on Jade.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we look to say Xero, which has had incredible sort of dominance, across small business accounting globally. But you were talking there about having that real focus on a niche. I often sort of ponder what does the future look like for New Zealand in terms of where we can win when it comes to software. And I often come back to thinking, hey, it's about being able to find these niches that aren't being served well with the right sort of technologies, which seems to be sort of where I guess a lot of your successes have been.
Yeah, I think the other bit which is really interesting is you start to see some of these different partners now seeing complementary parts of their product suite, and I think it comes back to that theme of backing winners or trying to pick winners. Is sometimes you start off with a really tight focus in a niche and you go really deep and build your value proposition around that. And you can't predict whether that solution will then be used for coffee or used for a different commodity, or that there might be a really nice overlap between, say, a mid-market dairy company that uses the Able software and a Contact product, and suddenly they're starting to share data. So, back to your question around, where does the future look like for New Zealand software, and where do we win and succeed globally? I truly believe it starts in those niches with a global mindset from day one, but building that in, winning and going really deep in that vertical, and then from there other opportunities will emerge that you could never predict.
Yeah, you do a great job on one thing and then the next opportunities open up. Yeah. I guess looking back on your learnings, if you were to share, one or two bits of advice with our listeners that that you think can make a difference for a leader, for an organisation, what would those things be?
Well, I think I'll break it into two parts. One, on a personal level, I think it's just really important to maintain your own energy level. So back to those basics around eating, sleeping, exercise. I find, that is key for myself. And then if I look more broadly, I mean, you've got all the ones that you'll hear time and time again around staying really close to your customers, surround yourself with good people. But for me, the ones that I'd build on that is be authentic. You've got to carve out your own style and not try and be anyone else. So that would be number one for me. And number two would be keep it simple. It's so easy to overcomplicate, whether it's the messaging, the strategy. Just keep it really simple. And that helps with how you can communicate it externally, but also internally. And yes, it will take longer than you think, but stay the course.
Yeah, that's great. And how have you kept it simple with, because there's a lot of complexity in the technology. There's a lot of different offerings that Jade's involved in. So How have you been able to keep that simple?
Yeah, well, ultimately our core mission is all about helping SaaS specialized products built on scale that are built on top of the Jade platform. And a lot of the things that we do, whether it's helping enterprise customers who need to resolve an issue, it's how do we resolve that in a way that delivers value for them, but can bake that back into the platform which goes out to the community. And so having that as the North Star is really helpful, because every time you've got a trade-off of decisions, you can go back to that. And ultimately, is this the right call to make or not?
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's a real privilege to catch up and to chat with you. Thank you, Justin.
Oh, thanks for having me, Paul.
All right, cheers. Thanks for listening in to this episode of the New Zealand Business Podcast. Be sure to look up our other episodes featuring many of New Zealand's most innovative and successful founders and leaders, such as Sir Peter Beck of Rocket Lab, Sir Graham Henry, former All Blacks coach, Rod Drury, founder of Xero, many, many more. The New Zealand Business Podcast is proudly brought to you by Gorilla Technology, the information technology services firm helping medium and smaller organisations maximise their uplift from innovative technology use whilst minimising cyber risks. If it's time to start or accelerate your artificial intelligence enablement across your organisation, then visit gorillatechnology.com today and inquire about how we can help. Feel free to ask for me, Paul Spain. Thanks again for listening in. This is Paul Spain signing out. I'll catch you on the next episode of the New Zealand Business Podcast. The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.